Among the most controversial debates through historic analysis, normally most of all historical sources, has come to us codices, text, literary or artistic works, which contrast each other to compose an approximate idea of events that has unfolded through a specific place in time. However, this task has become a very difficult and hardly contrastable work, since sources are scarce or have a high mystical or mythical value against a pragmatic point of view. Over the centuries, access to culture, the improving media and its information, a historiographical approach has made great strides. However, not always these fundamental advances have allowed a one-side view of conflicts or social and cultural events. As with everything, there are as many versions as people, even though historical studies should focus on facts and not on personal perspectives. Despite popular belief, there are hundreds of cultures in the world, some of relevance, and many other smaller or already lost, lacking objective sources to be considered as valid within the prism of historical research evidence. While in the West, historical documents have provided valuable guide to build a timeline. In the East in particular, literature and art have traveled in a very different path, both conceptually and expressively to the West. Unfortunately, in many cases, the only references that have survived are oral teachings, legends, and/or hardly verifiable documents. Although our tradition is known as Kaze no Ryu School, this name must have been dated from a relatively recent era compared to the existence of the culture in which they originated and developed earlier in time. The information passed on by the old masters to this day speaks of people of indigenous origin as the cradle of knowledge inherited today. Such people call themselves Shizen, the naturals, by the natural and wild environment in which they lived upon northern areas of Japan. These territories were the impregnable fortress of the Ainu, of indigenous Caucasian features, arrived from mainland Orient, entering Japan from Kamchatka and Sakhalin Islands, and also of descendants of the Jomon period until 17th century, when their power began to wane until the end of the Edo period. Despite their name, different nominations were also heard, and they even were confused with other ethnicities. Probably, according to the vestiges legated from their culture as dialects, Isengo, beliefs and practices, they were to be a mixed blood people who remained in a survival economy for centuries before the conquest of Hokkaido in their impenetrable forest, bordering with Japanese control areas. During this time of increasing pressure, Shizen people remained hidden from their enemies by spreading themselves throughout 4 villages. Legend tells us that they were named Yabu, Yama, Tayo, and Kawa. Thus, the separation of the secret enclaves allowed them to receive support and communications among villages that guarantee their survival. Their combative practices that time were known as Uchu Shizen, which could be translated as the domain of space and nature. These martial arts lacked a formal structure, as is considered the Bugei-ju Japan, but it was thought a fighting system based on naturalness, tools and utensils, as well as the resources available in their environment, and especially a strategic system to guarantee firstly the protection of villages, mainly based on terrorize the attackers, either by using a mystical fear and other of more explicit nature as a mechanism to keep out invaders. The old masters used to say that Shizen possessed an arsenal of at least 100 different weapons, including blades made of bone, lianas, bamboo spears, sticks, forks, etc. The richness of its practice is not only martial, but a cultural and spiritual heritage make this a valuable and tangible treasure, impossible to recreate or venture, and only accessible by immersion with a legitimate teacher. When the border pressure became unbearable, many were killed, but many decided to immigrate and spread throughout Japan, maintaining their culture and practices in clandestinity. One of the most valuable, resourceful, and necessary movements for the survival of their culture during that time was to adapt their particular filing system to the aesthetic and structural canons of Japanese thought. Surely, this transition didn't get immediate results, but it must have been the efforts of several generations, one after another, managed a higher level of adaptation. Sometime in the 18th century, on the basis of Kazoku no Kake family tree, described in the documents themselves, Ogawa Hishimaru composed and catalogued the makimono, roles composing a schematic structure, mokuroku, of the disciplines, forms, and studies, and also giving name to the school, Kaze no Ryu, the wind school. Having a structured training in Shoden, Chuden, and Okuden, in the latter including the lineage that has survived to this day. The last Ogawa names appearing in the family tree were Katsuo, Nobuaki, and Hiroshi brothers that disembarked in Brazil in the mid-30s of the 20th century. Trained by their father Saburo Ogawa as tradition dictates, they immigrated from Japan in a period of huge Japanese immigration to countries in America and Europe. Brazil hosted a lot of Japanese, making the country the second in the world in number of Japanese immigrants population. Hiroshi Ogawa created a future in the mid-20th century, helping Japanese colony to fend off the Shindo Renmei, a terrorist organization that frightened the Japanese Brazilian population in the 40s of 20th century, under the banner of an invincible Japan after the Second World War. Self-defense classes earned him the respect of most of the colony and laid the foundation for the maintenance of tradition in Brazil when Ogawa Shizen School was established. Thousands of people studied the arts of Bugei and Shizen heritage, mainly Japanese Brazilians, but also Japanese and foreigners traveling to the school to study the great knowledge that treasured Ogawa Sensei. But just only 64 were recognized as Shidoshi. Despite the frequent visits of Japanese practitioners, Ogawa Sensei was denied as heir to the tradition for decades due to the tough and exhaustive training and teaching ways, which were based on overcoming the students' limitations to forge their character, enduring their body, mind, and spirit. For such reason, the Kaze no Ryu Japanese masters named this line and its methods as the Ogawa Ryu school or style of Ogawa. Despite the influx of students, it remained clandestine in the media until the 90s. In 1994, an article about Aikijitsu appeared in the acknowledged Brazilian journal named Ki, which indicated, among other details, the recognized masters to teach the Bugei of Ogawa's tradition, among which is Shidoshi Jordan Augusto. Formed by Ogawa Sensei with honors, he has remained steady for decades since his formation as Shidoshi, in constant work to maintain a vast tradition that includes physical, mental, and spiritual disciplines. A tireless worker with thousands of articles and dozens of books, he moved with Shidoshi Juliana to Spain in 2006. Now with the students, including Japanese, in dozens of countries and thousands of videos with martial and cultural information, both of them are a bastion of conservation of arts and seasoned knowledge in the 21st century, as they have been recognized with the Alive Treasure Award.